Hockey is officially becoming America's sport, and we are going to see that loud and proud in Boston this Thursday. Big news on the Rays possibly moving officially outside of Tampa, but even bigger moving news is the Bears could actually be moving to Indiana. And could that have everything to do with the man named Muggs? That and more coming up on Sports Talk with Dad right now. Welcome back to another amazing episode of Sports Talk with Dad. As always, my name is Kyle, and I cannot call this Sports Talk with Dad without the man sitting next to me, a man who was alive the last time the United States of America dominated in hockey, my dad, Tim.
You mean the Miracle on Ice?
The Miracle on Ice against Russia, and we had the brawl basically on ice against Canada.
No, that was the beatdown on ice. That was awesome.
They booed the national anthem.
Yeah, it seems to me that's a wrong thing to do to a bunch of Americans because those players were fired up. 3 fights in the first 9 seconds.
Yeah, you don't boo the national anthem.
No.
You just don't. Nobody boos the Canada national anthem because nobody cares about the Canada national anthem. What a hockey game.
It was
3-1,
awesome.
Intensity galore, and now we have the finals
In Boston.
USA, Canada, Thursday night. I normally don't watch a lot of hockey. Like, I watch the Admirals because they're my team in Milwaukee. I check out the Lightning because they're my NHL team. I watch the Predators because I like seeing the Admirals players playing in professional hockey. I am watching this.
This is must-see TV because I don't know if you heard, but the manager or the head of USA Hockey has invited Donald Trump to show up at the Boston Garden.
Listen, no matter what your political beliefs are, Boston is going to be on fire if Trump shows up, and in a good way. It's going to be loud.
It will be, oh my God. Whether he shows up or not, it's going to be insanely loud.
It is.
Because Boston is the heart of America, and they are going to remember what happened in Canada. Those players are going to be fired up.
Yeah, and it's a lot of angry Irish people.
Yeah.
A lot of angry Irish Americans. It is a different world. Now, this is what's interesting with the Four Nations tournament, right? Because I didn't realize this is basically their all-star game now.
Yes, and NHL is brilliant. This is a brilliant idea. And they're getting rid of their all-star game. My question is, should baseball, for example, do something like this and have
something like this?
Not the World Baseball Classic. That's before the season. I'm talking like a 2-game elimination tournament. Take the All-Star week instead of just the All-Star game, because the All-Star game has gotten rather boring, unfortunately, over the last few years.
Yes.
But have the United States versus Japan or Korea, maybe Asia, the Dominican Republic.
Well, don't forget, it's only NHL players in the Four Nations tournament.
Well, it could be
it would be only Major League Baseball players.
Sure.
So, I mean, yeah, I think it'd be cool to have Japan in there, but there's not necessarily enough Japanese players in it.
You don't have to follow the exact thing that NHL is doing, but I just think it would be a kind of a cool week. Let them play international competition, and the All-Star game can take a back seat, because honestly, the last several years, really going back to when they split it up and they started playing interconference, interdivisional baseball,
right?
Interleague baseball. It's not the same. It used to be the only time the players saw each other was in the World Series or the All-Star game.
I agree.
And there was no trading to speak of where guys didn't go from one league to the other. Those were intense games. Those were must-watch TV.
Before my time, honestly.
It were.
I mean, that really ended when I was a kid. Interleague play started.
Yeah, it was. And when they started getting free agency, and I'm not begrudging free agency by any means, but it did change the nature of the All-Star game. I mean, fortunately, there's never going to be another Pete Rose and the Ray Fosse that was taking it to the bad extreme.
Yeah.
But the games used to be intense, and it used to be a lot of these players would play the whole game. There wasn't a guarantee of every team's player getting into the game.
Right. Well, that's one thing I do think the All-Star game needs to change, is you do not need a representative from every single team.
I agree. Unless you're in their home town.
Correct. Yeah. If you're in Milwaukee and there's no Milwaukee All-Stars, you have to have a Milwaukee player on the team. That's, of course, has to happen. But other than that, Like, there were plenty of years back in the early 2010s where it's like there should be no Cub on this roster.
No, and there's no reason to try to get that Cub onto the field.
No, you're taking away from people that earned it too. Like, there are
Correct.
people that should be in that game that earned it
Mhm.
that you're saying no to because we have to have a member of every team on here. And I think that's a joke.
Yeah.
It's an interesting concept. The problem is you take away the home run derby, which is by far the most popular all-star game
No,
attraction
it
of
was
all time.
It was not the most popular. Most popular thing that they ever did for that was having the old timers game, where you brought
That would be
back
cool too.
they brought back the Henry Aarons and the Willie Mazes, and I mean, right now today you could bring in Robin Yount from the Brewers, you could bring in Derek Jeter for the old timers game,
Yeah.
and all those guys, and to have them play. I mean, I still remember Luke Appling in the first ever Cracker Jack old timers game. A 76-year-old guy hit a home run off of Warren Spahn
And out of the park.
out of the park.
Like, they had a shorter fence, and he
Granted,
hit it out of the park.
He was still
Or
76
out over the fence, at least, I mean.
He was 76 years old and he hit a home run.
Yeah, like 375 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a shot.
It was.
It was well done.
It was very well
And
done.
the fact that it was Cracker Jack All-Star Game is great. I agree with you with that. I don't think this would work in an MLB format. I just
Well,
don't, because they have the Baseball Classic.
Which
Nobody really watches that. The ratings aren't great. They're higher,
you'd have
but
to
they're
take
not
a-
great.
You'd have to take a week out of the season. And I don't think baseball's ever going to do that.
Well, they take a
They
take a
take-
week off for the
No,
All-Star
they take
Game.
3 days.
Yeah, you're right. It is 3 days. But the Home Run Derby, I think, makes too much money for them.
Yeah, and it's a good event, although they need to get rid of the stupid changing the rules that they're doing and
I
go
agree.
back to just
You know,
having-
one place I think this would be perfect is the NBA, because they just did this whole captain thing,
That was
and it was
stupid.
really bad. And so I think you could do with the international play that you have now,
Mm-hmm.
especially since you're thinking about doing an international league tied to the NBA. I think that would be a great addition to the All-Star game to have All-Stars out of different countries.
I'm
and do
good
this
for
sort of
that
concept.
because I couldn't watch that All-Star game.
The NBA All-Star game has been unwatchable for a while now.
Yes.
At least when they had the old format where it's just play, you know there's going to be no defense,
Right.
but you want to watch it because you're going to see stars do interesting things you don't normally get to see them do.
Yeah, because nobody's going to get underneath them. They can do the great slams or whatever.
Exactly. That was at least watchable. They're trying to make it competitive. It's not competitive. Baseball, I don't think you could do this,
I don't know. I just was thinking about that.
but it would be interesting to see you. Let us know what you think in the comments below. And while you're down there, like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you get to enjoy this show as much as we enjoy making it. Speaking of baseball,
Yes, in your baseball jersey.
my baseball jersey, USA for hockey, but it's baseball. Speaking of baseball, updates with the Rays Stadium has gotten very, very interesting as pitchers and catchers have reported.
Yes. So, okay. So the city of St. Pete has allocated $1 million. Most of that going to an engineering firm to study what has to be done to the stadium,
Right.
to get it going. But the owner of the Rays has come out and said, we're not sure what we're going to do yet, but we'll let you know by March 31st, which is their deadline.
This has been ongoing for a while. We've been following this very closely. Obviously, we lived in Tampa for a very long time and are supporters of the Rays organization. They've been a great organization in a terrible location. This is not this is the nail in the coffin.
I
The
think
Rays
so.
are not staying in Tampa.
And we've talked a lot about them going to Salt Lake City as probably being a
That's
natural.
where they should
fit.
go.
They're not. They, I think, at this point, will be in Orlando. They've got an organization there that started by Pat Williams, the owner of the Magic, who brought NBA basketball to Orlando, and it's been doing very well. But in 2019, he put a group together. It's called the Orlando Dreamers, to bring a major league expansion team originally to Orlando. I don't think they're going to expand to Orlando of all places.
No,
with the
Florida
Rays
baseball
sitting there.
doesn't work.
It doesn't, but they are. I think that's where the Rays are going to end up, because I think Major League Baseball wants to keep them in Florida, and if they can't do that in the Tampa area, they'll do it in Orlando.
Well, the problem is Tampa needs to step up and
I don't
fund
think
the
they're going.
stadium, but they're not going to.
I don't think they're
a
going to.
hockey town.
Yeah.
They're like, listen, we got the Lightning. We're good with that. They
They
bring in
got the
nothing.
Lightning, they got the Buccaneers.
And the Buccaneers. That's true. And they get the Yankees coming in, and they have the single A Yankees there, which sometimes get stars for rehab assignments, and they actually draw more than the Rays, believe it or
Well,
not.
and that's the problem with the Rays have always had. It's just the Trop is a dump,
It's a bad stadium.
and it's in a bad location,
Very bad location.
and you have to drive across that stupid one of the 3 bridges
Yes.
to get from Tampa to St. Pete, and that's traffic nightmare, especially now.
And terrifying.
Yes, well, that bridge, if there's high water, yes, it's terrifying. But right now, with the over 1 million people that have moved down to the Tampa area in the last 8 years,
Right.
there's always traffic.
Yeah.
And so what normally should be an hour drive to get from the north side of Tampa over to St. Pete is now a 2.5-hour
Okay,
drive.
Time out. Time out. In what dream of yours does it take an hour to get from the north side of Tampa to St. Pete on the lightest of traffic days?
I made it there once.
Okay, at 2 in the morning?
I don't remember, but it was late.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that does not exist. That is a hour and a half to 2 hour minimum drive to get from North Tampa to St. Pete.
According to people I know down there, including your sister, it's even longer at an hour.
Of course it is.
It's
of
ridiculous.
course it is. There's so many people there. Listen, Orlando makes more sense to me than staying in St. Pete.
Doesn't make sense to
But
me.
you still have the I-4 traffic. You're going to try and get the Disney traffic there, but the Magic have seen it too. Like, you're really kind of hoping the locals buy in, and Orlando's a terrible time to get to if you're coming from Tampa or even the other side on the I-4.
Oh,
I mean, the traffic in Florida in general is terrible.
I don't think you're going to see Tampa people going over to Orlando for a game. I just don't. Lakeland maybe, but you're right. To get to there, unless they've done a ton of road construction, which I think they've done some, but not enough, it's a long drive to get into Orlando, and where they probably would build the station or the stadium around Disney someplace.
I'm assuming so.
I would think that's on the western edge of Orlando.
The problem is when you get to the traffic in Orlando from Tampa, I've made that drive to Disney several times when we were down there, and it's a long drive.
Yeah.
It's a lot of traffic.
We
made the mistake of leaving Disney at 5 once.
Oh, that was bad.
And we just stayed in the park. We found the exit, went back to the park for a couple hours, and then went home. And we probably got home faster doing it that way than we would have staying in traffic. So with the way Florida is now and the way Florida supports baseball, it just doesn't make sense to keep a team there. They really need to move out of the state if they want to become profitable. The problem is you have an owner that likes living in Florida.
Well,
and I get it.
You also have Major League Baseball who wants teams in Florida.
But why?
The Marlins have not been a success.
No.
And Tampa, as good as the franchise is, and by the way, the Rays have put together really good teams.
Yeah, the Rays just spent more in free agency than the Cubs did, but that's a story for a different day.
The fact is, they've always got a competitive team. They're a great organization as far as building teams.
Correct.
People don't go.
No.
And I don't think in Orlando, I mean, you're competing with Disney, Universal, SeaWorld, and everything else that goes on in Orlando.
Yeah.
I just can't imagine people going there.
No.
A season ticket base.
I don't either. I mean, the only reason people go to games in Milwaukee, and Milwaukee loves the Brewers, don't get me wrong, but what's been a huge draw for them for years is because they're right off of 2 major interstates. It's easy on, easy off.
People from Chicago can get up here, plus the fact they've got that retractable dome to make sure that every game's going to be played.
Correct.
You can't build a stadium in Florida without a roof.
It has to have a roof. Although they're playing without a roof this summer.
Yeah, let me know how that works out. That's going to be ugly. They're also going to be out of town for about 2 months in the dead heat of summer.
You have to be. You can't play in Florida in August and July.
No.
You can't.
They tried that in Houston when the Colt 45s first went there.
Good luck.
Yeah, it was a nightmare.
Yeah.
It was before my time, but just hearing my brother who lived down there talk about it, he said it was just brutal.
Yeah. And that's before they believed in giving athletes water.
Yeah. That's another story.
It is another story. It's going to be an interesting thing to have. You have to explain this to me real quick. What is Major League Baseball's obsession with having a baseball team in the state of Florida?
I can't put my finger on it. Yes, there are a lot of people there. The TV markets are growing. That being said, Miami is an abject failure.
Correct.
And they should in my world, they would be contracted,
Right.
and the franchise would just go away. But baseball still thinks they can expand, which is insane.
Yeah.
Miami should move, and when the Rays finally drop the ball and say, "Yeah, we're leaving Tampa," they should be allowed to go wherever.
And it should be Salt Lake. I
Uh,
mean, that's just my opinion.
Well, it'd be the quickest, easiest solution. The problem is with Tampa, is there a core of Rays fans? Yes, there is.
Small.
It's small, though. Most people in Tampa go to Rays games to see the opponent because everybody is a migrant into Florida.
Correct. There's Boston fans, there's Yankees fans, there's
Cubs
even
fans.
Toronto fans, there's Cubs fans there. Everybody's going to see a different team.
Red Sox fans.
Nobody's going to see the Rays because it's not an enjoyable experience in the ballpark. It's just not. It's a bad stadium. It's in a bad location, as you've mentioned several times.
It's sad. I feel bad for the Rays ownership. I think they're coming to realize, are we going to build a lot of it out of our own pocket?
Right.
A $1.8 billion stadium. How long are people going to pack that thing? Even at 30,000, I don't think they're going to sell out for more than a year or two.
Not if they're in St. Pete.
Right. And
I mean, this is still the city where your team went to the World Series and they had to block off seating. I mean, that should have been the end of it.
Yes.
Like, hey, this isn't working. We need to find this team a new home.
Well, it's same in Miami. They built that thing, and nobody goes to that stadium to watch the Marlins play. Nobody.
No, that was a complete waste of money.
Yes.
They should have given that money to the Dolphins to build a new stadium down there. But that's, again, Miami being Miami. Another team is talking about moving in a different sport completely. There's been some news on the Chicago Bears.
Yes. So I was looking through a lot of things, and something caught my eye. The state of Indiana has passed a bill to establish a commission to look at finding land in Northwest Indiana with the...
So Gary.
They just said Northwest Indiana. Gary's up there.
Gary is Northwest Indiana.
Fine. I didn't mention that. But with the express purpose of trying to get the Bears to move from Chicago to Indiana.
Really?
And this was looked at originally in the 1990s by the Bears.
You told me this.
And they decided to stay at Soldier. Now, however, I mean, you look at the Giants and the Jets. They play in New Jersey.
Yeah.
So it's the San Francisco. They don't.
You're playing San Jose now, right?
Something played Santa Clara.
Santa Clara, that's what it is.
So it wouldn't be that unusual if they could, and it's going to be part of a total redevelopment of the Gary area.
You'd have to.
In their minds, because it would bring a lot of hotels, and they do a Camden Yards thing, a whole revitalization to the neighborhood.
Yeah. Well, you'd have to. I mean, Gary, Indiana is either a ghost town or not a very good area, depending how you want to look at it.
And if you did this, and if the Bears would move there, that would be a landing spot for the White Sox, I'm sure, at that point.
Well, that would be awesome. If you could bring the Bears and the White Sox at the same time to that location, that would completely revitalize that area and would be huge for that corner of that state.
Yes, and
but you're not moving just the White Sox there.
No,
you
that
have
would
to
be a
move
disaster.
both the Bears and the White Sox. If you just move the White Sox there, then you're not going to get Camden Yards. You're going to get the Detroit Tigers, where it didn't work.
It didn't work. And you're exactly right. The Bears are the linchpin. Now, do I think they're going to go? There's a lot of opposition to where they want to build a stadium on the lakefront. There's Save the Park organizations that are just trying, saying, no, this is our lakefront. We don't want a big, giant stadium there.
Which I get.
I do too. And
it's a very pretty area of Chicago.
It's gorgeous. And this is going to be a large facility if it ever gets built. But it's between $4 and $5 billion to build on the lakefront. Indiana is a much less expensive state to live in.
It is. Well, and the problem is if you build in Chicago, the city of Chicago is going to pay for that. The Bears aren't going to throw anything because it's going to be owned by the city. It's just like Soldier. I mean, that renovation on Soldier, the Bears really didn't do anything with it. That was the city of Chicago doing that renovation.
And if that's because the city of Chicago owns Soldier Field.
Correct. Well, and they're going to own that other stadium too.
Yes, and there'll be concessions or whatever they get from the Bears. Indiana will probably, possibly kick in a lot of money to build the stadium in Indiana.
Yeah.
So it's going to be an interesting thing to
Or
see.
Arlington. But if you're looking at state taxes,
Yeah, go to Indiana.
they're less in Indiana.
Well, the cost of living is less in Indiana. You and I were talking about it earlier. The question would be, because Halas Hall right now is in a northwest suburb.
Yeah.
And that's where their training facility is. That would probably have to move to Indiana as well.
100%. You would move everything
Right.
to, I'm just going to say Gary, because that is the northwest corner right outside of Chicago. And I have to assume that's where they're talking about right now.
Yes.
Because the land's cheap over there. I
Well-
mean, really, that town has been on a downfall ever since was it automotive or train? It was a manufacturing area, and it was
the heart of the Rust Belt.
It
back in the
was.
glory
And then
days.
whatever was there left. I don't know the full story. Let me know if you know in the comments below. But it really kind of is a ghost town now. There's really nothing there. It's a pretty beat up area. So bringing this is huge and good for Indiana for really bringing this to light of day.
Yes. And look, if I'm the Bears, I've got to listen to them this time. I've got to take a look and say, okay, do we really want to go there? What's the stadium going to look like? What's the area going to look like? What kind of revitalization? And does the family want to be part of that revitalization?
Because the land's going to be free.
Correct.
Let's be honest. Indiana's just going to say, here you go.
Yeah. And if they're going
Here's your tax breaks. Here's everything. Take it.
and they're probably going to build the biggest portion of that stadium.
The state will. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
because they
There'll be a
want-
big buy-in.
Because let's face it, Gary is something they know it's blight.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a good area.
No.
This would be a great way to revitalize it and
Agree.
start a turnover of that area.
Definitely.
And people who say, well, nobody will drive to Indiana. People in Chicago drive to Notre Dame every
Yeah,
weekend
but-
for a game. They do.
When was the last time you've driven from inside Chicago to the Indiana area? Because I did it a few months ago.
It's not fun.
That's a rough drive, especially to the northwest area that I believe they're talking about. You have to, if you're in Chicago, you have to go over the Sky Bridge,
Okay.
which is fine and cool, but then you go into the toll before you get into Indiana.
Well, that would
And
have to be
there's-
addressed.
There's no iPass there. It is you pay for the toll. I was in traffic at that toll for at least an hour and a half of basically standstill traffic.
Okay. And the grand scope of obstacles they have to overcome to get a stadium over there, that's probably number 896.
Yeah, but I'm selfish and I'm thinking about me in this situation because, of course, I'd want to go to the new stadium.
Of course.
And that's a nightmare. It's an driving through Chicago in general is a nightmare. That loop doesn't help at all.
Well, and it would also be interesting for the other teams coming in because now they'd probably have to fly into what, Midway on the south side of Chicago rather than O'Hare?
You'd build an airport out as part of that,
So there's-
specifically for the NFL team.
Again, there's a lot of redevelopment that would have to take place. I just found it really interesting because the Bears still don't have a deal to get a new stadium. They want to break ground in this calendar year on something.
Yeah, Arlington, I think, was a bluff. I do. I think they were trying to get Chicago to pay for it and saying we can do this. And now that Virginia's gone, ownership is up in the air,
Well,
which is, from what you told me before we went on air today, is a darker story than I realized.
yeah, I was kind of looking into because I didn't know if Virginia was an only child or not because she owns the team.
Yeah.
There was another son,
Right.
George Muggs Halas Jr.
His nickname was Muggs.
His nickname was Muggs. Well known.
Why was his nickname Muggs?
I don't know.
How could you not know?
I
How could you find out somebody's nickname was Muggs and not know the story behind
because
Muggs?
I was reading the rest of this.
Yeah, but as soon as you get to that part, the rest of it stops being important for a second. I have to know why he was called Muggs.
I have no idea.
Because I've heard of Butch for Junior,
Sure.
but Muggs?
Yeah.
Did
was
he have a
great-
drinking problem?
No. He was like, from what I read, well liked within the NFL. He was basically part of the ownership of running the team.
Yeah.
And George Halas Sr. was going to give him the team.
Muggs.
Muggs.
Yeah, okay.
Muggs was going to have the team.
Muggs is George Halas Jr.,
Correct.
but we call him Muggs now.
Yes. It's a great nickname.
It sounds like a Looney Tunes character,
Yeah, kind of.
like one of those mobster Looney Tunes characters that Bugs Bunny went after. That's my favorite
That's
nickname.
true.
I am going to name one of my children Muggs now. I don't know which one. Time will tell. But one of them is now known as Muggs.
Oh, I know which one.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah. It goes without saying which one.
I know which one's Muggs.
Yes. So, anyways, so at the age of 54 in 1979, I think it was December 16th or something,
Because Halas died in 86, right?
83. Don't forget, he died before they got the Super Bowl.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought he was alive for the Super Bowl.
No, he wasn't. It was all his things. The last thing he ever did before he passed away was hire Mike
Ditka.
Ditka.
Okay.
So, but Muggs died of a sudden heart attack at the age of 54.
Yeah.
When I was reading the article, George did not want the McCaskey family to have the Bears.
Yeah,
at
why?
all. I don't know. It didn't say. But they made no bones about the fact that Halas did not want the McCaskies to have the team. Maybe it was just about the name. I don't know. But he was no way wanted that. But that's what happened. After Muggs died, his children, he had 2 kids, got part of the shares of the team.
Yeah. So
But-
Muggs's kids got
Owned-
his share.
Correct. Part of it, yeah. And then the McCaskies had 11 kids, and then Virginia was a controlling interest. But apparently, Muggs's kids and the McCaskies didn't get along at all. There were lawsuits that were filed. There was even at one point they thought that Muggs was murdered. They had him exhumed.
Hold on. Time out.
Okay.
Back up here. Dude's name's Muggs.
Yeah.
And there's a murder conspiracy.
In Chicago.
This is the greatest story I've ever heard. Continue.
So they exhumed the body, and they're going to do an autopsy to see if they could find any reason that he might have been murdered.
Yeah.
The spinal column's not there. The heart, the liver, it's all gone and filled with sawdust. Because back during that time, that's what they did with autopsies.
Okay.
They didn't replant everything. So, no sign of any murder. Massive heart attack. Apparently, he had shown signs of liver disease and other things, anyways.
Which is where the nickname Muggs came from. Got
I
it.
don't know. But the McCaskies and the Halas clan didn't get along.
Okay.
So at some point in the early 90s, Muggs's children are going to sell their shares. But wait, even though they had a deal in place to sell them, the McCaskies had right of first refusal and they matched it. And so they bought them out.
So, okay, back up. Muggs's kids, Halas's grandchildren from his son Junior,
Correct.
or Muggs, they had half the shares to the Bears, right?
No, it was a smaller percentage. They owned about 20%.
Okay, so Virginia got the controlling interest because
Correct.
she was the only living heir.
Correct.
Okay, and they had about 20%, and they were going to sell their shares for whatever reason.
To somebody else. Well, because it sounded like they needed the money for whatever reason.
Okay.
In debt or whatever. And they had somebody that was going to buy it.
Yeah.
McCaskies matched the offer.
Because they had the right of first refusal.
And the article did say that the McCaskies gave them a little more than the value of the offer.
Yeah, a
because
nice
his
little
family-
flip the bird.
Yeah. It was so bad that the son of Muggs said, yeah, I didn't even get a call from the McCaskies who knew my dad died. I had to hear it on the news.
Because Muggs died before Halas died.
Muggs died in 1979. Halas died in 83, I believe.
Got it.
So now you've got, I think it's Mike is running the Bears or part of the organization that runs the Bears.
Yeah.
They've made it clear the McCaskies are not selling the team.
Well, they can't. That was the other part of it. They can't.
Well, they can, but they'd have to get all 11 kids. Virginia McCaskey had 11 kids. So they all own part of this team.
It's a good Catholic family right there.
It's a nice Catholic family. Exactly. That's the first thing that came to my mind, too.
So, because she put the team in a trust, correct?
I'm assuming, yes, it's in a trust.
Okay.
So,
Because
but
it needs court order to be sold, right?
it would have to go to court to be sold. Correct. So it has to be in a trust.
Yeah.
But each of these 11 kids own about 4%.
Okay. Who owns the majority then?
That's what's up in the air. I mean,
so the trust owns the majority.
The trust owns it right now, and that trust is being run by, I believe, Michael McCaskey.
Okay.
He's worked for the Bears for years, and he's part of the ownership group.
Got it.
The other people that own the Bears are, and I'm going to butcher how you say this, but it's the Brizzolara family. They own about 8-9%.
Okay.
They worked for Papa Bear way back in the day.
Got it.
And were on the board.
Yeah.
So it was two brothers. They got that percent. The other one is an Andrew McKenna estate. They own 2%. I don't know where that came from, but they're the guy who owns 20%, essentially Muggs Children's percentage.
Yeah.
Is Patrick Ryan, the head of AON Insurance. He's a billionaire, and he owns the 20%. And they've said if the Bears ever sold, that's probably who would buy it.
Yeah.
It's going to be ugly because they have to figure out, okay, how are we going to do this? You got 11 people now, theoretically, that have the right to make decisions.
And
about
some of them are going to want to be bought out.
I would think at some point.
Out of 11 people, there's going to be at least 3 of them.
Well, and that's,
from me seeing in my own life how these things go, somebody's going to want to be bought out. And it's going to start a whole thing.
Well, and that's part of it. If I were Michael McCaskey, I would try to find a way to buy my brothers and sisters out.
Yeah.
So
get it back under one owner.
Get it back under one owner like it was, because Virginia.
And bring back the honey bears.
Well, that we'll talk about in a minute. Virginia held about 22.6, but total with the entire family, they owned about 49% of the team. They are the controlling interest of the Bears. The Halas, McCaskey / Halas family owns the Bears.
Yeah.
And that's going to continue.
Now it's just the McCaskey family.
They've got Halas blood in them. Their mother was a Halas. And I think, honestly, that's probably why George didn't want it to go.
He wanted the Halas name to stay with.
Correct. And forever it will be. Let's face it, the Bears are George Halas.
Yeah, but I want to go back to the murder story. Muggs was murdered.
His kids thought he might have been. But there was no proof.
A guy named Muggs might have been murdered.
In Chicago.
That's the greatest part of this story.
Chicago.
In Chicago, of all places.
I mean, Muggs is a perfect nickname.
Where 10,000 dead people voted for a president. I mean, this is...
Well, I mean, to me, Muggs was born in like 1925.
Yeah.
Muggs fits right in with
Capone
and that whole era, and it's a great nickname.
It's my favorite now.
By next week, we will tell you how he got the nickname Muggs.
Yeah, how do you not know the answer to this?
I didn't even...
Like, my ADD, I would have seen Muggs and not known everything else you just said.
I got so wrapped up in the story of this. And the McCaskies have, with the exception of Virginia, getting rid of the Honey Bears, which is why they haven't been back and won another Super Bowl.
100%. They were gone as of 1986.
Yeah, as soon as she took over.
Yeah.
So really, after 85.
It was after 85, 1986.
They were gone.
It was a conspiracy. Trust me, I know about it.
Honey Bears they were great cheerleaders.
It's a great name.
Yes, it was.
I mean, that's a really solid name.
Virginia had a problem with it.
I understand. So it was still a great name.
Yes. So anyways, now the 11 children each hold 3.8%. So those 11 kids hold.
And the trust owns it. What we understand to be a trust.
Well, now wait a minute. The 11 kids and 2 nephews, it says here, own 3.8%. And that means 47.6% is under those kids. And Michael's one of them.
So it's not under a trust. It's been split.
Doesn't say here if it's under a trust or not.
How does 3.8%?
It could still be in a trust.
No, I know, but I'm trying to do math, and that's a terrible idea for me. 3.8. Well, what's 3.8 times? What did you say?
4% times 11. 3.8, just make it 4, is 44%.
And then the extra 2. So that gets you there. So it's not in a trust. This has been split between 11 people.
You don't know it. I don't know if it's in a trust or not. It should be, but it's not.
But it's all you have so they're not the controlling interest anymore.
13 people.
13 people own 3.8%, which means the guy who owns AON Insurance at 20% is now the controlling interest of the Bears.
Michael McCaskey still runs the Bear, and I think he's the controlling interest over that, and he represents the family.
This is so confusing.
Well, and that's just it. And there's going to be a lot to come out of this over the next few years, unless Virginia's had the wills locked down.
which I'm sure she did.
I'm sure she did too. I'm sure she did. It was a fun story to start to go down the rabbit hole. I played you.
Yeah.
And I went down the rabbit hole.
Welcome to my world.
Yeah.
This is what I do every single night.
I get it.
And yours at least pertains to this show. Mine does not. Mine's why we're tagging Great White Sharks conspiracy, you know? It's why we're actually going to Mars and that we're not actually going to Mars. We're going to an asteroid to get gold. Like, that's what I go down. It means nothing, but it's fun. I need to know why he was called Muggs. Like, that's what I took out of this story is why was he named Muggs?
George Halas Jr. was nicknamed Muggs by his father, George Halas, the founder of the Bears. Doesn't say.
Then you have failed me. You've told me no information.
Look,
all you reiterated is that his nickname was Muggs.
Why was your name Boo when you were little? Because I gave it to you. He probably just pulled it out of the air.
That's not how it works. You wanted me to be booed at sporting events because you're cruel.
No, and your brother was named Bear. I mean, it's just a nickname you give little kids. Muggs stuck.
There has to be a reason.
No, none that I can find right now.
There has to be a reason.
We're going to have to dig into it. There you go. Go down that rabbit hole. Find out why he was called Muggs.
I'm going to know why he was called Muggs. And there's going to be no information. It's going to drive me nuts, and I'm going to keep staying up at night for 3 years wondering why the heck his name was Muggs. I need to talk to the Bears.
That was just the best name. Could you imagine having
Muggs Halas?
Muggs Halas owned the Bears. He should have taken care of himself.
Outstanding.
Yeah. Okay.
Muggs Halas. That is one of the greatest names in the history of the world.
Well, and we brought it back for this entire episode to give him his props because he was apparently a great football guy.
Yeah, well, and we never got to see it come true. It is interesting, though. I want to circle back here to the fact that the Bears could be moving to Indiana.
Well, it's one of the options that's available. Will that put pressure on the city to build the stadium quicker? I would think it was going to put some pressure on, because if the Indiana steps up and they say, yeah, we'll build you the stadium, you get us your designs.
Kane County did this for the Chicago Cubs. The Ricketts, who are turning out to be terrible owners.
No, they're turning out to be
they're the Tribune. They're the Tribune. That's all they are. Again, the Rays spent more in free agency than the Chicago freaking Cubs. I'm angry at my team, and it hurts me. But if you look at this, Indiana's going to give them tax breaks galore. They're going to give them free land. The state's going to chip in for a stadium that the state is not going to own. You can talk to the White Sox to come along with them to build this whole sports complex arena. Yeah. The taxes are less for players now because Illinois taxes are insane.
Correct.
You can build a whole community out there really just for players to stay in. You're going to bring a ton of hotels. I'm sure, you'll bring a casino because that's how football works now along with it. I mean, you're going to really do what Israel of the Colts did with Lucas Oil.
Yeah.
I mean, he owns that whole area and has built it up.
Sure. And if I'm the
Here's a question is if you are Colts owner Israel, what's his first name? I can't remember right now. It doesn't matter. But what is he going to say about this?
Is it Robert?
I don't think so.
It's Irsay, by the way.
Irsay. See, I can't even get the last name right. So what is Irsay going to have to say about this? Because he really controls Indiana when it comes to sporting complex.
There's a long distance between Northwest Indiana and Indianapolis.
I understand, but right now with his new stadium and him having that area really built up himself, he hosts the Combine.
I understand.
He hosts the Big Ten Championships. He hosts FFA Nationals. I mean, he hosts a lot of events there, and a lot of those events are going to go to a new stadium.
Well, concerts will go up there. I mean, this will be a new concert venue.
And they have concerts in Soldier now, but it's indoors now.
Believe me, I don't think this passes without them already talking to Irsay and going, look, we're thinking of this. You cool with it? He's probably already given a sign off. Could be wrong, but it's a long drive to get from Gary, Indiana to Indianapolis.
It is. And a lot of windmills, by the way, in case you didn't know that.
I've made the drive, and it is a boring drive.
It's a long one.
Yeah.
I made it twice in 2 months. That is a long, long drive. I think it's a great idea. I think you're going to revitalize an area that's been dying to be revitalized for a very long time. I don't think it's going to hurt Chicago that much because they're still going to profit more on the south side, which is then going to revitalize areas of the south side that hasn't been touched in a very long time. I think it's going to do a lot for that whole area.
And just
Is it going to be indoors, though?
it have to be.
You're going to build a dome?
Going to build a dome. There's no way. And what that would also then do is the Bears would have a Super Bowl.
The Bears would have a Super Bowl, but that whole area is going to have to be revitalized before the Super Bowl comes.
It's fine. They did it in New York for the Giants.
They did, but they've been in New Jersey for how long?
I understand that, but I mean, this is not unusual. They're going to have the Super Bowl in Santa Clara this coming season at the end of the season.
Yeah.
So
And people can still stay in Chicago.
they can. It'll still be called the Chicago Super Bowl.
It will be. It will be. In the same way it was called the New York Super Bowl.
Correct.
But again, I don't want to see the Bears with a dome.
I don't either.
That's what bugs me about the whole thing is the Bears are going to get a dome. And that's going to leave the Green Bay Packers you can't even call it the black and blue division anymore.
Well,
Packers are going to be the only outdoor stadium.
in that division, the only other team outdoors would be Pittsburgh and Buffalo
In Kansas City.
and New England.
In Kansas City. There's still a lot of outdoor stadiums.
Yeah, but I mean in the North.
Who is there now? There's Kansas City. They'll always be outdoors. Buffalo, they're building a new outdoor stadium. The
New
Patriots, they're going to be outdoors forever. Although I could see them going to a dome at some point. The
And
Packers,
The two New York teams.
yep,
That's it.
one stadium.
Seattle's outdoor, but you worry more about rain than snow up there.
So there's still a few.
Few. But anyways.
You have to explain to me, by the way, why the Vikings play indoors, but the Twins play outdoors.
there's some things I can't explain. How in the God's name, if you're in Minnesota or Detroit, do not build a retractable dome over to your stadium to guarantee your fans, hey, whenever you come to a game, it will be played. Oh, by the way, it won't be 40 degrees in that game in April.
Yeah, if the Twins ever get good and they play the World Series, which, by the way, goes into November,
Yeah, play that in Minnesota in November.
that's a cold day. That is a very cold baseball game. Other news going on in the NFL, just to get into this real quick, there's been some NFL free agency news. We're still waiting to hear some players to be cut, specifically Devontae Adams and specifically T. Higgins. We're waiting to see if he is going to be tagged or not. It sounds like he is. But let's play the game on a couple of these guys with some of the big free agents.
Okay, so Andy Dalton re-signed with the Panthers.
He did.
2-year deal. Russell Wilson hasn't signed. They're talking on this article I read, and it was on ESPN.com, that Russell Wilson's most likely to go to the Jets, which I hadn't heard.
You shut your mouth.
What?
I have been saying that for months.
I've never heard it once from you. I don't know where it's coming from. What?
This is unacceptable behavior from you.
I've never heard you mention the Jets for Russell Wilson once in my life.
How dare you?
What?
I have brought this up on 3 different episodes of Russell Wilson going to the Jets.
No, you haven't.
I hate you so much right now. I have. You can go back. There's video evidence. I have been talking about this forever.
I don't think you're right.
I hate you.
I know.
I hate you so much right now.
Anyways, the other ones, Khalil Mack, they've got tagged for Green Bay.
I can see him Green Bay. Well, here's where it depends with Khalil Mack to me. Because Buffalo needs a Von Miller type to replace Von Miller.
Yes.
And Khalil Mack played in Buffalo for college, and he fits there really well. It's really a homecoming for him. I see that as his first choice. Again, I love the Packers. I do. I'm a stock owner. They are a very overrated team right now, and a Khalil Mack is not going to make the difference on that defense.
No, but it would be like when they brought in Julius Peppers. It's filling a hole, and it would be still has gas in his tank.
He does.
He'd be a great edge rusher.
I think he's still good for 10 sacks a year, at least for the next 2 years.
I mean,
But we are a lot farther away than when we were when Julius Peppers came to Green Bay. We were fresh off a Super Bowl when Julius Peppers came to town.
I know. Would I rather have Myles Garrett or Max Crosby? Yes. Do I think either one of those are moving? No. Khalil Mack is going to be a free agent.
I think it's a smart decision if the Packers bring him in. But again, I really think Buffalo is more of the direction. Buffalo is going to be very aggressive when it comes to pass rushers. Because you just saw what destroys the Kansas City Chiefs is continuously getting Mahomes under pressure. That needs to be their full focus this offseason. And so if they don't get Garrett or Crosby, they will get Khalil Mack.
They'll make a big play for him, and it would be a good fit. Then there's the Packers, who are sitting there with Jair Alexander, who I think is going to be cut.
Cut or traded.
Or
yeah.
trade. Everybody in the league knows he's going to not be a Packer next year. Why would you trade for him when you could just cut him, unless you want to give him a 6th or 7th round pick? The problem with Alexander is when he plays, he's one of the top 2 or 3 in the league.
Correct.
The problem is he doesn't play unless he's 100%.
Correct.
He reminds me of that guy, to go to an old movie, from North Dallas 40, the running back who would never take the needle. And he wouldn't play unless he was perfect. And then finally he took the needle and he destroyed his knee. And I think Jair has watched that movie.
Or Varsity Blues, where that was also a thing.
Same thing. So T. Higgins, they have going to the Commanders.
He's not. They're going. Joe Burrow is going to renegotiate his contract. They've already said they're going to tag T. Higgins. He's staying in Cincinnati. He said he wants to stay in Cincinnati and would take less to stay in Cincinnati. Which, why wouldn't you? You have Jamar Chase literally sitting right there, taking all the double teams. It leaves you wide open.
Well, and I think Joe Burrow wants to bring a Super Bowl to Cleveland.
Yeah, and honestly, if
Cincinnati, not
Cincinnati, yeah, I know what you meant. Really, if you take that second half when Joe Burrow finally got healthy again, I mean, Joe Burrow should have been the MVP of the league. I mean, he had better stats than any other quarterback, and he really wasn't fully playing for the first 4 games. I mean, it's a good team that needs a defense.
It does. Well, it also needs.
So it's another area Khalil Mack could go.
It could, but they also need an offensive line to protect Joe Burrow, which they need to piece one together.
They're getting really dangerous to pull in an Andrew Luck with Joe Burrow here. They need to fix that offensive line. Chicago's doing the same thing. It makes no sense to me why offensive line, you can get away with a second-tier running back if you have a great offensive line. We saw that with DeMarco Murray in Chicago or in Dallas all those years ago.
Correct.
That can happen. But if you don't have an offensive line, you can have Derrick Henry, and it's not going to make a difference.
No, because you're going to be stacked in the box, and you're going to be stopped. They have Darnold, getting back to this article, they've got Darnold going to the Raiders. I could see that. I still think the Giants are more likely.
Again, I've been saying that for a while.
That one you have.
Oh, you gave me credit for that one?
You've been saying the Giants since day one. I'll give you credit for that. Let's see. Scrolling through here. They've got Hassan Reddick going to the Commanders as well. They think the Commanders are going to be very aggressive in the offseason.
They should be. They have a really good team.
They do. They do. Here's going to be my question.
And you have a quarterback on a rookie contract.
They have Rasul Douglas, former Packer, never should have been traded, going to the Buccaneers. Stephon Diggs staying in Houston.
Stephon Diggs doesn't have really a big area to be signed. He's great, but he's hurt, and he's getting to the end of his career, and it's unfortunate.
They got him in Houston. Here's my question, because they still have the ones that they don't tag in this article that I could see was Rodgers.
He's not cut yet.
He's going to be.
But he's not.
He's not a free agent, but he'll be cut. And Russell Wilson is going to be probably to the Jets.
Yeah, which I've been saying for a very long time.
The other one they've got here, Aaron Jones is a free agent.
He's going to stay in Minnesota.
They've got him going to Denver.
I can see that. That's a really good fit for him, actually.
I still would like to see.
I could also see him in Kansas City.
Be a good fit in Kansas City.
Because they need a running back. Pincheiro broke his leg in the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And let's be honest, he wasn't a difference maker. It depends how much Aaron Jones has left in the tank.
I think he's got enough to make a difference. He had a great year last year.
He could, but he's one of those running backs where when he's done, he's done.
He's going to be done.
Well, it's just a matter of not if, like every player, but when.
Correct. And you're rolling the dice, but he's not going to cost a lot in the grand scope. If you've got some cap room, he's a $7-8 million player at the
he's
highest.
4 at this point now.
I don't know.
They signed him for 7 in Minnesota.
Yeah, and he had a great year. He didn't get hurt this year, which
he was hurt for parts of the year.
But he was there consistently.
I mean, you could probably get him for 5 or 6.
I mean, I could see him in Denver. I could see him in Kansas City. But I'd like to see him along with Josh Jacobs in Green Bay. Of course I would, just because he's a Packer forever.
Should have happened this year.
Should have.
But wouldn't have made a difference. We weren't that good.
And that's my question with Khalil Mack, honestly, is Gutekunst just doesn't sign guys over 30.
He doesn't. I think he would in this case. But again, my question is, how much of a difference is he really going to make in Green? Do you really think that's the player that could make the biggest difference for the Packers? Because with Jair assumed to be gone, I mean, we have a huge hole at corner. That leaves us, I don't think, with any corners over 6 feet tall. I don't even think Jair was over 6 feet tall, to be honest with you.
He wasn't.
So if you're talking about a free agency focus for Green Bay, a pass rusher is not a top target, in my opinion. You need corners. You have the safeties. Now you need the corners.
Right. Well, and Chase Young is also.
And you paid Rashad Gary to be that pass rusher.
Yeah.
He's not. He's not. But that's what you paid him to do. So you already paid a pass rusher. You need a corner.
You're going to have to find one, and it's going to have to come out of the free agent market.
I just don't think Khalil Mack is the difference maker.
Honestly, I'd go and get Rasul Douglas.
Yeah, I would too.
If it were me, I mean,
he's also at the back end of his career.
He is, but he's still a solid player. You got Chase Young, who's also a free agent. They've got him tagged for the Lions, which would be.
Who was it again?
Chase Young.
That would be a great signing for the Lions.
Put him with Hutchinson? Yeah, it'd be scary.
Yeah, I mean, again, it would be a great fit in Green Bay, but the problem is Jair's going to be dead cap if you cut him. You signed Kenny Clark. You signed Rashad Gary. I mean, you don't have much more room.
The only team that they have Russell Wilson going to is the Giants.
Yeah, I can see that.
I could.
I think Dayball's in more of a dire situation than having Russell Wilson being your starting quarterback. I mean, Russell Wilson looked great for a couple of games and then just fell off the map at the end of the season.
Yeah.
You would have been better off with Justin Fields starting those games.
At the end of the season,
and I'm surprised they didn't make that switch because they re-signed Justin Fields, right? The Steelers did.
He is going to be a...
And they haven't re-signed Russell Wilson, so that tells you what the Steelers think of Russell Wilson.
They've already told Wilson he's not going to become brought back.
Yeah, so that tells you what they think of the difference between Justin Fields and Russell Wilson.
It's going to be interesting to see where all these guys end up. It's early in the fiscal year or the calendar year for the NFL doesn't start until March.
Yeah.
Middle of March. So it's going to be interesting to see. I don't think a lot of these guys are going to sign maybe in as late as June after the draft and
a lot of these older guys for sure. I think Khalil Mack's going to wait till after the draft to see, because I think his value. Well, here's a question: do you think his value is more prior to the draft or after to the draft?
Depends on what each team drafts. I mean, I would want to get him off the market. I think he's got value. I don't want anybody else to have a chance to grab him, so I sign him. Here's the problem with the draft. It's not a real strong draft this year.
It is for defensive and offensive linemen.
For linemen, yes. Not a sexy draft is what I probably should have said.
That's okay.
And
non-sexy drafts build teams.
And we will hopefully be in Green Bay broadcasting that. We'll make everybody sound great.
Yeah.
But there's only one quarterback. Wide receiver is not as deep as it was last year.
Right.
So it's going to be...
There's going to be reaches for quarterback. The last thing I saw was Jackson Dart going in the first round. And I think it's going to happen. I think he goes to the Steelers, honestly.
They're going to be
a reach. It's a
you're
better
right.
reach than Kenny Pickett, but a reach nonetheless.
This is a draft for the big uglies, as John Madden used to call it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good draft for teams to build up. There's a lot of defensive and a lot of offensive linemen, which teams need. It's the most underrated positions in football.
Sure.
It's the one nobody pays attention to and instead gets their quarterbacks killed.
Well, look at the Packers last year. They drafted a guy for the left tackle. He was out all year.
Yeah, that was a dumb pick. I called that on our draft show that was a dumb pick.
I would have rather had Cooper DeJean, as he turned out.
I got that one wrong because I said you don't draft a guy with a broken leg. Let
me revise that to you. You don't draft a guy coming off a knee injury.
Well, I said that too. You don't draft an injured player in the first round. Cooper DeJean, I was wrong. I never saw him run, to be fair to myself. Yeah. So I am going to go with that. But you and I have had a great show. As you all know, you cannot have a conversation with your dad without your father getting the last word. So it is all you.
So I saw something this week that just kind of boggled my mind. The state of Washington is named after our first president, one of the greatest living humans in American history, George Washington. The only state to be named after a president. He even has his face on the flag, at least for now. The legislature, in their infinite stupidity in Washington state, is saying, we don't want George Washington on our state flag anymore. It comes a point where if we fail to remember what happened in history, we're doomed to repeat it. George Washington, for all his faults, was one of the greatest Americans to ever walk the earth. And it was great that they honored him by putting him on the flag. Leave him on the flag so people can remember and learn all about Washington, the good, the bad, and the indifferent. And they should do that with every president, because every president has good points and bad points. But George Washington, we aren't American independent without that guy. He should be on the flag.
You know who hates George Washington?
Who?
The British.
He is the only president not born in America.
Was he not born in America?
No, he was born in England.
How? Then he broke the law.
It wasn't a law then.
Thank you so much, as always, for watching. This has been Sports Talk with Dad. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.